Okay, well, I think most of us are on. I'm still looking at 159, but I think we'll go ahead. I think we'll be fine by the time we kind of get through our introductory comments. I think we'll be in fine shape. If we could, Patrick, if we could kind of go through our role somewhat quickly to document attendance, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be doing the roll call. Please indicate, unmute yourself and indicate if you're present. Harris County Commissioner Adrian Garcia.
Here.
Thank you, Commissioner. Dr. Carol Lewis.
Here.
Thank you. Madam Chair Karen Parkman from Metro.
Here.
Thank you. Chuck Rempel, GAC Executive Director.
Here.
Thank you, Chuck. Liberty County, David Douglas.
Here.
Thank you, David. City of Houston Council Member David Robinson.
I am here.
Thank you, Council Member. TxDOT Houston District Engineer Eliza Paul.
Yes, I'm on.
Thank you. Fort Bend County Commissioner Grady Presty.
Here.
Thank you, Commissioner. Sugarland Mayor Joe Zimmerman.
I'm here, Patrick.
Thank you, Mayor. Waller County Commissioner Justin Beckendorf.
I'm here.
Thank you, Commissioner. City of League City Council Member Larry Milliken.
Here.
Thank you, Council Member. Montgomery County Judge Mark Keel. City of Waller Council Member Nancy Arnold. Port of Houston Executive Director Roger Gunther.
Here.
Thank you. Harris County Flood Control District, Russ Coffey. I understand there's an alternate, right?
Yes, correct. Dina Green.
Thank you, Dina. House of Representatives Ed Thompson, ex officio.
Yes, here.
Thank you. Madam Chair, that concludes the roll call.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that. Going back to our agenda, just kind of remind each of us that since our last gathering, a couple of things have been forwarded. I think there was a letter that had been sent from the TxDOT Executive Director to Representative Thompson that we received in our packets. And while we were on the call last time, we got the submittal from TxDOT from Eliza. I don't know, was there anything else that was forwarded, Patrick, just for the record?
Yes, so before we proceed to the main items, would we like to acknowledge any public comments or receive any public comments?
Yes, I was gonna do that. I hadn't forgotten. I just wanted to make sure that everybody, while we're kind of going through the public comments, everybody had everything that they needed from what had been transmitted. So
Madam Chair, yes, so we did, I did send out an email yesterday as well as right before the meeting at 1:20 that has all the comments we have received so far. That includes, so the comments on the working draft of the MOU, that includes City of Houston comments, TxDOT comments, Harris County's comments, as well as Metro's comments. In addition to that, a letter from Representative Ed Thompson. It's a letter from TxDOT Executive Director James Bass to Representative.
Perfect.
So I sent all those items at 1:20 if you're looking for your email.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I just wanted to make sure everyone had that. All right, now going on to item number 2, public comments. Is there anyone who has signed Patrick in advance?
Madam Chair, I think we received one comment in writing, and we'll be posting that to the website. Neely, if you're available, will you be able to mention the details of that comment?
Sure, Patrick. This comment comes from Jeanette Rash, Operations Manager for Tow and Go SMG, Government Affairs, Texas Towing and Storage Association, and an AirCo board member. And this comment is in support for segment 2, and it discusses some of the flooding issues, as well as freight and autonomous vehicles. And so it's also about flooding concerns, the retention of floodwaters during the construction of certain things. So it's quite long to read it all, but it is posted. Unless you want me to, I can read through it, Dr.
No, I think we appreciate the summary. All right, so.
Thank you, Neely. And at this point, I think we can invite any members that would like to make public comments. So we have a toll-free number that attendees can listen to and make public comments. So if you are a member of public would like to make a comment, please press *9 to raise your hand, and we'll be able to unmute you. Or if you're on the online call, you should be able to raise your hand by clicking the hand button. Either way, please raise your hand and we should be able to unmute you to speak.
I see one hand raised, Neil Edhart. Good morning, or good afternoon rather. You're unmuted. Please state your name and your comment.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Neil Ehart. I'm a resident of Houston and interested in I-45 and these changes that are being proposed. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to comment today. I'm pleased that so many interested parties in the NHHIP have come together to talk. And I guess I'll start by saying I disagree that segment 2 is designed is a smart way to go about this. I hope that you will focus on public transportation and on improving the connections between the seven of these you members today are members of the suburbs. You're not from Harris County. And I hope you will take this, to think about how you can get public transit connecting your urban core to our urban core, because I don't think freeways are it. I believe you're going to meet a lot of opposition if you keep chasing that path. So good luck to you all, and thank you for hearing my comment today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for taking the time to be here.
Patrick, that is the only hand I see raised.
Thank you, Greg.
Okay. All right. Thank you. With that, Patrick, I think we're ready to move on to item 3.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So moving to the, I will be providing a background on the items that we have discussed in the last round and the changes that I have made or proposing to make to the working draft of the MOU. I did send this item, so I'll be opening the item 6 in here on the screen. We have discussed some of the comments that we have received from TxDOT at the last meeting, and some of the wording changes that we have talked about are in the second paragraph related to the purpose and goals of the North Houston Highway Improvement Program. There was a mention of looking into the goal of the regional transportation plan and add some goal related to increase in multimodal transportation. So that is the goal we have. Increase in multimodal transportation network is the goal we have in the regional transportation plan. If everyone is okay, we could be adding that to the goal of the project there. We did not mention anything about single occupant.
Patrick, can I comment on that a little bit?
Okay.
This is Eliza. I think that paragraph is intended to be put down what TxDOT's goal has developed when we were doing the environmental process and all that. So, I mean, I think all those goals were actually part of our environmental process, and I don't think we can add stuff to it right now. I mean, background was like the history of it, right or wrong, whatever, but that was what it was, and that's what was included in the document. I think, I just don't think we can go and add an additional item to it right now at this point in time.
So let's just do a clarifying point. We're talking about paragraph 5. Oh, you're at paragraph 2.
Yeah, I'm at paragraph 2.
With the increased modal transportation network.
Yes.
Where are y'all? Which document are you on?
Right, good point. So this document is, Patrick, help me. This is the document that you forwarded at 1:50 this afternoon.
Yes, at 1:20.
1:20. Okay.
There's attachment 6.
All right. So these are, and who proposed these changes?
So these are based on the discussion we did at the last meeting.
Right. So starting off with the first item shown is paragraph 2, and that first insert was a result of our comments last week at the meeting. And so what we're hearing from that is that particular paragraph was designed to reflect what TxDOT had included originally in its document as goals. And the increased multimodal transportation network was not in their original document, I'm hearing Eliza say.
Well, may I make a point?
Absolutely.
For some reason, I thought we last time kind of got to resolution of the first page. I could have been wrong, but unless somebody proposed this change, unless Eliza proposed this change, I'm not happy with the change, you know, but if the county proposed it or the city proposed it, well, then I think we ought to consider it. But if nobody proposed it, if the staff just put it in there, I don't think we should.
No, I think it had been proposed.
By whom?
It was a result of conversation that occurred when Commissioner Garcia was talking specifically about the importance of multimodalism.
Okay, well, then I'm fine with it. But, you know, if this is Commissioner Garcia, I know you're on the line.
Right.
Does this enhance the MOU in your opinion?
Well, if I could, let me back up and let's address, first of all, the question of if this is intended to be background, which is the information that came to the table at the sort of beginning of the process, so to speak. And so if the second paragraph, which starts off reading, the Texas Department of Transportation has developed recommended improvements with the goals to, then the implication would be that these were the goals that TxDOT had in their document. If Eliza is saying that this insertion does not reflect their original goals, then it probably shouldn't be here as background. But the fact that the increased multimodal transportation network is hugely important to all of us, it maybe should be somewhere else, but maybe not necessarily in the background under the paragraph that leads off with TxDOT. So maybe, you know.
I thought we resolved that and decided it didn't belong there, but it did belong somewhere else. So I'm just confused.
Well, you may be right, and I'm suggesting now that it does not belong there. But
I agree with that, but I do think it belongs somewhere.
I do too.
It does. Madam Chair, if I could weigh in on something.
Please.
My understanding is that at the last meeting, Eliza indicated that there was inserting particular language, as Eliza has just said, that TxDOT can't accept it in whether in background or in the MOU. I'd like to just ask a point of clarification. I think I was going to do it, but I've been told that someone else has done it, that we've gotten some attorneys to really understand what can be put in the MOU and what cannot, by virtue of the Federal Highway Code that governs TxDOT.
We have done a little bit of work on that, and we have an answer, but it's on a limited issue, as it turns out. But, you know, let me know, Dr. Lewis, when the right time is for me to share that information. I mean, I think on this paragraph, I think we already agreed that that concept does go somewhere, but not in this paragraph. So, you know, it doesn't happen to be, this is a factual paragraph,
right?
And that's just not the facts. However, the other addition down here, those are the facts. You know, public engagement for NHHIP, those are the facts. And so I don't see why we can't put that in, but let me know when we reach the legal issue that we looked at.
So let me ask this question. So I think that what you just said is 100% where we are. We had agreed that the language would be added in this fifth paragraph, I think it is, about what the public engagement process yielded. So that the information that you have from a legal perspective, does it cover the entire document or does it cover one section?
It covers the concept, and let me just pull up the email. But it is a really important concept.
Mm-hmm.
Hold on one second. I'm trying to find it, but it covers the concept of what language can be used to discuss potential design changes without running afoul of the NEPA process.
Okay,
And
so now that I understand that, you're right, that's huge. If we could, let's see if we can get through this paragraph, and then that will be the next item we'll go to, because I think that if there's one thing we can agree to today, it would be that particular issue, is what language we can put in the MOU that would allow us to be clear about the fact that we want refinements looked at to the baseline alternatives that are in the DEIS, but not go afoul of, as was stated, anything that would have to be done in the NEPA process. So if we could people could kind of look at this fifth paragraph. Chuck, did you want to say something?
Yes, Madam Chair, if I could just make a quick comment. I believe what Patrick is doing for us is he is taking the document where he worked to incorporate our previous discussion into the document. And since then, we also have additional documents that have been sent over the last few days from some of the signatories. And those comments are not necessarily, and correct me if I'm wrong, Patrick, incorporated in this first document that we're looking at. So I think the item right now is to quickly go through and say this is what we discussed last time, and then we can take a look at these newer comments that have occurred since then. I think this is Patrick's attempt to go through and take all of our conversation and put it into the document So we can start with that, and then we'll be able to consider the additional comments that have been provided by the City of Houston and by Metro and Harris County once we go through this, just to make sure that we captured our last conversation and then talk about the new stuff.
Well, may I make a comment? I think that is not, and Patrick, thank you. Thank you so much for doing that, because I can see why you thought that would in fact enhance this. But it seems to me going forward, you know, everybody here knows how to submit a comment. And that language was added here that we'd already agreed didn't belong there. So I think we may be making ourselves more work by just staff sua sponte adding comments that nobody submitted. No, I mean, I was unfamiliar that staff was supposed to go back and synthesize. I thought everybody was, maybe they were, but I thought everybody could.
No, one of our follow-up action items was for staff to synthesize the comments and make an attempt on the document. If we want to move beyond that, we can, but I do want to clarify that that was actually agreed upon.
We'd already agreed on. What's happened here is something was added that we'd all agreed didn't belong there. So that's the problem. But that, okay, we've taken it out. So now we go
to the 1, 2, 3, 4, the fifth paragraph. Yeah. So what we'd like to do at this point is to look at that paragraph, if we can, and express whether that shows what we think were the primary comments from the public engagement process. And so if I could ask you, let's look at it conceptually, not wordsmith, you know, the particular English sentence structure, but conceptually looking at the various items that are there. And let us know if there's anything you think is missing. Let's start with that.
Because there will be changes from the subsequent comments that we received from the entities as well. So this is not meant to be a final. So.
Right.
Well, I think it captures, I think it's a good paragraph.
I agree.
Okay. All right. If we can get a basic head nodding around, we're not going to vote on this, but if we can get just kind of a basic head nodding, or if there's someone who disagrees, if you would speak up at this point, and at which point, if we can get concurrence on that, then I would say we can scroll and get to that bigger issue of language about the definition of the alternatives, or
I have that too, Chairman Patman. If you're needing it, it was circulated, and I have the language if necessary.
Okay.
So it's not in here?
Actually, it came from my staff to me. I don't know how it got to them, but I've got what I think the Metro lawyers have found.
Oh, okay, yes, and I have it too. I see what you mean. Yeah, so we're down to number 5, or do we bless?
I'm waiting to see if there's anyone who had a difference of opinion about being willing to accept and embrace the language that's in that 5th paragraph. And so we're pausing for a second if somebody would like to unmute their mic and express discontent with that paragraph.
I'm sorry, Chairman. I would just miss the conversation that Councilman David Robinson was asking about what was discussed. I didn't get that part of it.
So hold it, and we're going to come back to what David Robinson was discussing in just a minute.
Madam Chair.
Yes, sir.
I would like to ask for a slight addendum to this paragraph because I'm just remembering that Harris County participated in the public engagement as well. And so if there's no opposition, I would like for that first portion of the paragraph just to read: the City of Houston and Harris County led an extensive public engagement process. Because although they were under the umbrella of the City of Houston, Harris County was sponsors and partners in those events.
I think the key verb here is led, Commissioner. I know there was lot of folks there, and I know a lot of Harris County. I know I'm not saying no necessarily, but our director of the planning department, Margaret Wallace Brown, and all of the staff were really dedicating tons and tons of time to that. So it may be a more, in the spirit of collaboration, I like it because it speaks to all the parties engaged. But I know there was, with the private consultant again, who was at Hewitt-Zollars, and the U of H group led by Susan Rogers and her team. So again, not all of the detail there is accurate. So if we wanted to add the City of Houston, Harris County, and others engaged in an extensive public process,
I would agree with that.
Yeah, that's a fine way to word it.
City of Houston led with the help of Harris County.
Beckendorf, I think that's
that way it recognizes Houston as kind of taking the lead on it, but also gives credit to the other entities that helped.
I think we're going to be okay with the engaged for now, because I think we'll be okay with the engaged. You know, as
I think if we're talking about concepts, I think one of the things that we feel strongest about at the city is that this really was collaborative. TxDOT was in the room. I know I spoke with Eliza at several sessions, and Varuna, and certainly commissioners were there.
And Metro was there.
Metro was there. You were there, Dr. Lewis. You know, it turned out the piece.
So I think we'll appreciating the comment, but I think in the interest of the collaboration and kind of getting through what we need to reflect in this particular MOU, we'll leave the engaged.
Okay, I just have one more comment, Chairman Lewis, just very quickly. I think my answer is yes, but I just want to make sure that this is what all the comments that come from the public, and it doesn't commit TxDOT to be doing everything that is on the list, because there's a lot of the stuff that I will require help from some other third party or from all the different entities working together to get it done. I just want to make sure that is clear.
Right. I think the language is clear because it reads: the public engagement process has resulted in the following themes. So it doesn't attribute that to any particular entity, just as an outcome of the process. So I think we're fine there.
And Dr. Lewis, it's in the
Thank
background. So it's not actually a commitment. It's just background for information.
Yes, correct.
Right.
All right. So I'm going to take that as a sign that we can roll forward and get the information on the legal comments that we had heard. And this is in regards to, I think, the big information pieces last week from TxDOT about making sure we don't risk
This is not
a
long.
glitch in the process, right?
Don't mind, I could read it. It's not a long statement.
Yeah, please go right ahead.
But coming from Metro and their government affairs group, it reads, team, we reached out to our legal counsel that is an expert in the NEPA process and asked the following question. Before a record of decision is reached, to what degree can TxDOT legally commit to changing the project? And then parenthetically, through future reevaluation or otherwise, end parents question mark. And the following is the response. On the issue of potential changes to an approved action or project after the issuance of a record of decision, ROD, the FHWA NEPA regulations contemplate that after a ROD, it may be necessary to have further reviews either based on new impacts or circumstances of the need to modify the approved action. See 23 CFR 771.129 on re-evaluations and 23 CFR 771.130 on supplemental EISs. And then the following, there does not appear to be any legal prohibition under the FHWA NEPA regulations that would preclude an agency prior to the ROD from agreeing to consider, in italics, matters such as revised alternatives, additional mitigation, etc., after the ROD is issued, as long as that consideration includes public notice and opportunity for comment and compliance with the procedural requirements in the NEPA regs. And then parenthetically, including any necessary preparation of a supplemental EIS, EA, or 130C document. Second is the final statement. However, that does not mean that the agency may, prior to issuance of the ROD, commit, in italics, to making changes in the project after the ROD is issued. Any commitment to a specific course of action could constitute, quote, predetermination, end quote, and could be challenged as a violation of the procedural requirements of the NEPA regulations. Metro.
Okay, great.
We can consider it without running afoul of the law. Commit to consider it. We just can't commit to do it, is the gist.
Yeah, they don't want to commit. That's the word. They like consider.
Well, and it sounds to me as if when we get to that part, it would be well to maybe even lift some of that language and be specific in the wording so that it reflects exactly what's in the NEPA document and what the intents are of the MOU.
I think Representative Thompson made that point last meeting, and it was an excellent one to help, perhaps provide some cover if necessary.
Right. Okay.
Well, hi, this is Eliza. I want to thank y'all for going into the details of getting a legal interpretation and a commitment on the NEPA process and everything that you just described. And it's correct on the majority of the issues that was described over there. I just want to emphasize and say that TxDOT is a very conservative agency, at least in my opinion anyway. So anything that is weird to us on the borderline, we don't want to be standing on the borderline when we do things. We want to be sure. We don't want to run the risk of losing our environmental process or anything like that. So I agree with everything that was said out there, but I just believe that TxDOT does want to be on the safe side, when we do a lot of that work and that's why we are so reluctant and has been so reluctant to commit anything before the ROD. The ROD is really the driving timeline here. We have a lot more freedom and we have a lot of ability to commit and consider or do whatever after the ROD, but before the ROD is issued, or we just was hold to very, very conservative view of not really want to commit to anything, just as an agency to consider the things. We definitely consider, and I have probably actually openly said that we are working and looking into a lot of the asks already. I probably shouldn't even say that, but we actually already are doing a lot of the homework and looking at all the stuff. We just are very reluctant to commit to anything at this point. And we are very close to getting the ROD stage, and any things that we do at this point in time can really jeopardize what we have been working for the last 8 years. It has been a long time. And we have spent a lot of time and effort on that.
Where are we, guys? Are we looking at some specific language? Because the only thing up on the screen is the language I think we've all agreed to about.
It is, and so Patrick, if you would roll, please. And so I think what we would actually be talking about is probably that third bullet that had come out on the issue of the risk involved in and how to say this. So what I would like to ask Eliza is if you would give the group an opportunity to try to craft some language that would be something that you would be amenable to, right? Because I think the whole intent here of the folks sitting around the table, and certainly what we've heard from the citizenry in our attempt to be responsive to them, is this consideration of the other alternatives. And I think if we don't somehow get that in our MOU, we're going to be missing something. So I think we have to find a way to scoop that in there.
Agree.
Agree. I agree too.
Madam Chair?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Representative.
And I was going to kind of reiterate what Liza was saying. And in the letter that we received, or I received back from James Bass, you know, he's pretty specific in that letter, talking about following the ROD, having options available to refine the project. We're committed to judiciously identifying a win-win opportunity. I mean, there are a lot of things that can be done after this ROD, I'm an ex officio member of this body, but you know, I guess I'm beginning to ask the question of myself is, are we putting the cart, you know, before the horse here in this MOU, in the fact that maybe after the ROD might be the time for this conversation? I don't have a problem. I don't think I'd have a problem us working on this, but as far as finalization of this, I think it might be judicious for us to take a look at this this ROD before we, you know, make that commitment.
So my thinking about that is it sounds tempting, right? Because even in my own mind, I thought, well, let me ask Eliza, when do we think the ROD will be out? I think the gap and the difference in that is that the reason we're here now is because when we approved the funding for Section 3, we had so many of our residents discontented because they felt like that approval of Section 3 was going to be sort of a wand of approval to move forward with Sections 1 and 2. And I think it's that area of their concern about continuing to move forward that would help them to feel better if there was some kind of agreement before, I mean, even now, I mean, just on the heels of the Section 3. So I think that's why we're here. Doesn't mean we can't, as a group, talk about moving or, you know, kind of holding the committee until beyond the ROD, but that would be something we'd have to talk about. So Eliza, when do we expect the ROD?
Well, currently we're working on the FEIS. There's two more steps before, there's one more step before we get to the ROD, which is the FEIS, the final EIS document. And we are very, very close to posting that.
But we would be talking about 6 months at least probably before we get a ROD, right? Or something like that. I'm just kind of throwing that up there, but.
Well, typically the ROD actually is issued 30 days after the posting of FEIS, typically on all normal job. That's the timeline that we go with. The ROD is 30 days after the FEIS. But in this particular job, we anticipate it could take a little bit longer than that. But that was, I mean, the 30 days is the standard timeline for a ROD after the FEIS in all our other environmental documents and all that, all our other smaller projects, I should say.
So we'll entertain comments from the rest of our committee. I think I'm sort of thinking we probably need to try to craft the language that would be appropriate given what we've heard from the attorneys and see if we can kind of get ourselves beyond this. Chairman Patman?
Well, actually, you just said it perfectly well. During the Metro bond, we committed to the community that supported the bond that we would be involved in the process coordinated by the county and the city to make sure that everything was done that could be done to address the concerns of the community. And so further to kind of everything you've said, Chair Lewis, up to this point, the reason we're here is because TxDOT is listening to the community, and that's fantastic. And they're willing to do this MIU, and that's the reason we're here. I don't think it will be seen as an advance of the process unless we have some language in there, carefully crafted, not to mess up the NEPA or ROD process, that shows exactly what Mr. Bass said in his letter. I mean, he's the executive director. I think we need to build on that just a little bit, but in terms of looking at design alternatives, but you could just say, you know, we will have, following the ROD, TxDOT commits to looking at options available to refine the project that take into account, I'm just extemporizing here, the concerns of the community, but he said it in a letter that's public. He sent it to Representative Thompson, and if we could just put a little bit more color around that, I think we'd be there.
I think so too. And I think we would want to take some time to craft the language. I would be careful, again, to look at what the attorney sent and to avoid the word commit, because they said consider. So we want to use the word consider as opposed to commit. So let me ask.
He said we are committed to judiciously identifying win-win opportunities. That's what he used, the word commit.
Right.
So I think we're okay to a point. You can't commit to a certain design alternative.
Right.
You can commit to looking at it, though, and that is important.
Yeah. Okay. So look, I do not have a law degree, right? But I wanted to. I just ended up with a PhD instead of a law degree. That's a long story. But the frustrated lawyer in me still makes me worry about the language a bit. And so I think we want to take some time and craft it. Probably not here, but if people agree, then that would be something that we would work on between now and the next meeting, kind of bounce around just those words and make sure that we have a level of people being willing to accept that wording at that point. Because I don't think we can do that here. I think it would be really difficult. But if we can kind of work on that and then pulse that around, does that sound like an approach to folks?
That'll work.
Okay. I don't think we had.
Madam Chair, let me just
please.
Just add that, Liza, I appreciate your perspective and wanting to exercise caution and not to derail the process of the project. But just from a stakeholder point of view, it'll also be helpful to ensure that we're not being told that something is definite when in fact it's not. And so words mean a lot of things. I think we've heard over recent days. And so being open to, finding small opportunities of opening to work with your stakeholders, it goes a long way. And so if consider is the word that can move us forward a bit, then I'm good with that. I mean, I'd like to use the word commit and promises and swears, and we'll give your firstborn to the HCAC. But I'm good with consider. But I would just ask from a stakeholder standpoint because I generally, maybe it's a fault of mine, regardless of my law enforcement background and being in politics as long as I have, I still trust what I'm told by my colleagues. And so it would help the process along to ensure that we're being guided along in ways that do not necessarily require the need to have attorneys kind of do the research.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
okay.
Thank you, Commissioner Garcia. I just want to add, we are definitely in this boat together. You know, I won't be sitting here at this table discussing if we're not considering or trying to get everybody together to a happy place. You know, I don't know any lawyer's terms or anything, but to put it simply, we are all working together to try and get to a good place for everybody. But I do want to point out, though, in James Bass' letter, when he said committed, he said that it's following the ROD. It's after the ROD. Then we can do a lot of things. Then we can commit. We can do everything. But before the ROD is what we really have to be very conscious and consider is fine. Now, you know, I'm good with consider. Really, the biggest word that we have a problem in a lot of this language is the word alternative. The alternative and the reevaluation are the two words that we absolutely cannot live with in the document. So I just want to point that out.
Consider is good.
Consider is good. And I think, Patrick, you've got all of that as background to sort of work on crafting that bullet for our consideration when we get back together. So in the interest of, and that was, honestly, that was a biggie. I almost want to say it's one of the biggest things we had to agree on. But saying that, when we look at the rest of the purpose section, I think we were fine with most of that. I think maybe that final bullet, I think there was one of the bullets there was a little extra thought about, but just kind of quickly looking at the rest of the bullets under the purpose section. And then
who proposed those? Who proposed those?
I think
so these are from so we had only TxDOT's comments last time. So TxDOT moved last two bullets from the scope of work down below. So those were brought up. No one said let's not do that, so we left it in there. That's that was towards the end of the discussion.
So these are TxDOT. These are in deference to TxDOT. That's just what I'm getting at.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I think, let me repeat what I think I heard Patrick say. It's not the bullets themselves, it's the location of them. So those bullets were in the scope of work before, but then they just got moved up.
Yeah, got it.
Okay. All right, so if we are ready to move on to the scope of work, is there any other discussion about
one narrative comment before moving on, just because it doesn't necessarily apply to the purpose nor to the scope of work, but the document in those two parts taken as a whole. I think some of what we've been thinking about relates to repetitive language versus unique language. And I think some of us reviewing the document in its specifics, that's not my dog, by the way.
And it's not, nor is it mine.
Mine, I'm sorry. Let me mute.
It's because he was trying to help out.
Yeah, I've got one of those. She's quiet right now. But the point is, you know, unique language said once versus something that is redundant or said here and then said later. And I'm not thinking of any particular bullet, but just wanting the document to be as succinct and tight as possible. So there were some things that seemed to us, I'll say broadly, that may not need to be stated in both locations. So that's kind of a narrative comment. I don't have any particular language that I'd like to add or remove, but just something to think about.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. So we will go through it with that in mind, council member, and thank you for that. Because I think we talked about wanting the document to be as streamlined as possible. Just
right.
Chairman, okay, so I see Chairman Patman's hand and I hear someone else. Is it?
I was just going to say that the dog wants to consider dog parks.
Okay.
Yes.
Go ahead,
The dog is saying this is a wonderful process and we're all doing great. Okay, let me just make a comment about these last 3 bullet points. I don't think they belong in this at all, or certainly not under the purpose of the MOU. They may belong somewhere, but the purpose of the MOU is not to recognize TxDOT's planning and NEPA efforts. That might be in a whereas clause or something like that, but that's not the purpose of the MOU, nor is the purpose of the MOU have anything to do with the coordination of seeking private funding. And I think we covered this last time. That might be something that, for example, Metro commits to, that we'll try to do that in our commitments, but that's just not the purpose of this thing, nor is conducting work in a timely manner. I mean, that's not a purpose. So I just don't think those belong there. So I'm not sure where they were moved from, but they're just simply not a purpose of the MOU.
So
I would second that.
Okay, and I don't have a problem with it either. The last bullet, I think we eliminated the need for it when we just talked about. I think the reason it was probably there was someone's anxiety that the process would slow down the process somehow, but I think we kind of dealt with that as we talked about the words that we're going to use in pursuing the options, alternatives, whatever we're going to call it at that point.
Well, can I say something, Chairman?
Absolutely.
Real quick. I just want to go to the bullet that says coordinate to identify if any project components are outside of TxDOT's purview. What external partners could lead those external efforts. And I remember when we were at the MPO talking about doing this MOU at the time. And one of the comments from Mayor Zimmerman, was to identify the parties that is responsible for whatever the work that is entailed in each of the asks that was in the mayor's letter at the time. I think that was a very important item for the MOU, and the reason for the MOU was partly because of that. That was part of the discussion at the MOU. So I really think that needs to stay in the purpose, because that was why we're here today. I mean, from that MOU meeting at the time. The other one that recognized TxDOT's planning and NEPA effort, that's really another way of saying we need to get through the rod before we can get into all these other stuff. Basically, we added that because we're trying to make sure that everybody's recognizing the planning and the NEPA effort and the outcome and the decision. So that is really a reinforcement of we have to get the rod done, and then we can go into a lot of these next effort. So I really just want to point that out, and that very last bullet on there is to make sure that we don't want to delay the project in any way. And I don't think anybody in this group or all 16 of us want anyway for this projects to be delayed. I think everybody is working very hard, extremely hard, spending a lot of the time working on this so that it will progress on a good timeline so that we'll see this job in fruition in at least the next 8 years, 8 to 10 years to get everything done within the time frame. So that's really how we are looking at this, our point and our reasoning for why we think those bullets are important.
So let me ask Mayor Zimmerman, since he was named in Mrs. Paul's last discussion series. Mayor Zimmerman, would you like to make comment at this point?
Thank you, Carol. Yes, and I think let me suggest a couple things that might, as I've listened to everybody, the identify the project components outside was definitely part. So I think it needs to remain. I'd take out the coordinate. I mean, it's a statement of fact that we want to identify any elements that TxDOT can't participate in and the funding sources, and that was the original intent. I think also it might be in this purpose where the sentence, the increase the multimodal transportation network, I think that's where we might craft some language to put forth, our intent to do that. That should be in the purpose and the parties, so that it again, I think that's another essential element of putting the focus on that. And then to Eliza's comments about recognizing TxDOT's planning in NEPA, I think that's more of to Karin's point, that's more of a, whereas the parties recognize that, and I'm not a language, I'm more of a concept, whereas the parties recognize that it's important not to, whatever the words are about NEPA and NHIP, I think those are attorneys' things. I think that could be up in the background before we get to the purpose and the parties. And I think that to me would kind of clean it up a little bit, and I think address all the concerns that have been stated.
Okay. All right. Let me ask, is there anyone else who has not had an opportunity to speak who would like to make comment? Because I know some of you have your mics off and it takes a second to get the cursor to location and get the mic back on.
This is Commissioner Beckendorf. I just wanted to just kind of reiterate what Councilman Robinson said. I feel like a lot of these pages we're repeating ourselves in some form or fashion. Let's kind of tighten it up and make it short and sweet and easy for just the average person off the street to read, because obviously this is under the public scrutiny. So let's try and make it short and to the point.
Okay. All right. Anyone else? Just a second, Chairman Patman, because I know some people might have their mics off, and I know it takes a minute. So the thing is, there are some of us who are very high energy, and I get it. There are others, who have more reserved personalities. So for those with a little more reservation in their person, want to give you a minute to get your mic off. I'm gonna make a real quick joke. Chairman Patman doesn't turn hers off because she knows it would just be off and on, off and on, off and on. So it's just like leave it on.
I guess I'm high energy.
You
and
are.
high
That's
maintenance
okay.
too, probably.
All right, but anyone else who's been back there with their mic off would like to get a comment in. Commissioner Prestidge?
You're doing a fine job, Madam Chair. You're doing a fine job.
No, I wasn't begging for that.
But it's great.
Voice of reason, though.
Well, thank you. So anyone else? All right, Chairman Patman.
Okay. Well, and I may have, and thank you all for being so courteous to me and making all these comments and listening to them. I think further to the comments made by Commissioner Beckendorf and others, and David Robinson about streamlining. I guess my concern with these extra purposes is the way they're worded. And this might be a place for Chuck and Patrick to work their wordsmith magic. But I just don't think they express what's intended. Recognizing TxDOT's planning, I mean, it seems to me, I would never want this to be interpreted as our accepting the rod as the final word. The whole purpose of the MOU, as we all know and has been reiterated here, is to be able to take into account the concerns of the community. So I think this is rewarded, recognized, or I wonder if this would go in the factual background section of TxDOT is engaged in extensive planning and NEPA efforts and anticipates a record of decision and blah, blah, blah in the background. And then coordinate to identify any project components. There just isn't anything in this MOU that specifies external sources of funding. And the MOU itself does not establish a coordination mechanism. That's not what this is about, but we're going to do it. And if it is about that, where that goes is in the commitments of the parties. Okay. And then to conduct work in a timely manner that's not something that this reads like a contract where people are committing to do something. That's the problem. So to conduct work and it may have been because these things were shifted that the verbs are not right. But the purpose of the MOU is to, facilitate the process between all the parties and stakeholders so as to avoid unnecessary delay, meet human. That's probably kind of the way. So I'm just wondering if this is one to turn over to our Scriveners here.
I think it probably is. And I think just hearing everything that has been said, one of the things that occurs to me is that it probably makes sense to keep the purpose short and sweet with as few bullets as possible. We don't really need a lot of bullets on the purpose. Sort of the purpose is very succinct. And I hear the reason that we've got some of the elements in there. The other thing that we haven't quite talked about is there's a section later where each agency is expected to do some delineation of its own. We talked, I think, somewhere between then and now about that section coming out of the actual MOU and going to a page as an addendum or a supplement to it, because this MOU is not doing, sort of like you just said, Chairman Patman, this MOU is not doing the actual agreements about specifics that will happen later. So for instance, if there's some private sector opportunity later, that's not going to be captured in this MOU. So the idea of it needs to be maybe somewhere, but in an addendum, not in the MOU specifically. So I think with that guidance, I think what we would say is let's try to collapse the purpose to just exactly what the MOU is trying to accomplish, which is just a couple of three specific items. Take some of the concepts that may be in the 3 bullets that we want to make sure we don't lose and find another place to put them. And I think on the final bullet about the timely manner and the delay, I think that bullet was in there before we had a full understanding of the rod sequence and the like. I think now that we have a better and more complete understanding of that, I think we can capture that idea as we put in our language about proceeding with whatever we're going to call. I don't even want to say alternatives anymore but whatever we're going to call the refinements, we can capture that within that idea as well. So if that makes sense, I think we've got kind of a marching agenda where we can kind of move forward. Okay, any objections, uncomfortableness, unreadiness? Okay. All right, Patrick, if you can scroll us up to the scope of work. Do we have some screen freeze?
Sorry, I think now you can hear me.
Oh.
So it's going forward. So we did receive, until now we talked about sections 1 and 2 where background and purpose, the comments that were brought from TxDOT and how we changed those. But since the last meeting, we received comments from City of Houston, Metro, as well as Harris County. Do we need to open each of those comments to specifically see what they said about these first two sections? Or did we already cover that?
So what I would say is that we look at those specific comments in light of the consensus we just gained on that section, and then move forward to the scope. And then what we can do is if there's something we think there's a question about, we can kind of reach out to the entities and say, you know, as a result of our meeting on Thursday, you know, this is what we were trying to collapse to, you know, are you fine with this? And kind of move from that point.
Okay, we will do that. Okay. So then I'll start from going back to the scope of work.
Mm-hmm. And I guess, Patrick, here we can look at each entity's individual comments because we haven't talked about this as a committee yet. So I think, you know, a fine place to start probably is with comments that have come in from Metro, the city, Harris County, and TxDOT.
Okay, so let me open TxDOT again. So we covered all these until now. So the scope of work, if you want to start from there.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want me to go over them kind of one by one, just to let you know what our thought process was?
Let's just do the first the first 3 bullets, and then let's do a comparison with the other entities as opposed to try to go through the entirety. So let's maybe the first 3 or 4 bullets. We can, you know, be flexible with that, but the first 3 or 4 bullets, and then when we get through that, let's compare with the other other agencies have said about the same 3 to 4 bullets, as opposed to trying to go through your entire scope.
Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Oh, Eliza, were you ready? Were you gonna walk through this? Okay.
Yeah, I was, but I thought everybody was just going to look at it and comment on it. But I can go through it.
Well,
the first bullet, we really didn't have much to change on that. I think we're good with the first bullet. The second bullet is we just realized that there's nothing in the whole document that really just talk about freight demand needs, across the corridor, and also hurricane evacuation, and the regionally significant nature of the corridor is an interstate, and it's for traffic to move goods from one area to the next. So I think those components need to be added in there. The third bullet, what we talk about, the original document, I think, commits everybody to public meetings. And my concern is, I'm not sure if I can really commit my resources and everything to do extensive, if there's really extensive public engagement, which is above and beyond what the NEPA requires us to do. I mean, we'll definitely coordinate and work with, we put the parties will coordinate and collaborate on public engagement efforts. But our thinking there is maybe TechStop need to do some of the public meetings that is required by our NEPA process. And then City of Houston or Harris County, they may want to do other public engagements that is specifically to what they need. And we'll all collaborate, working together. But I just don't see committing all our resources to do big, huge public hearing meeting that everybody has to be involved every single time. That
so
each agency could stop be doing different public meetings and all that.
Okay. Eliza, Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes, go ahead.
Eliza, is there already, you must have already budgeted your public engagement for this. I'm sure that that's a part of your budget going forward. And that aside, if Harris County and the City of Houston and anyone else were to do, public engagement, and look, we're not doing public engagement just to do it. We're doing it to impact this project and to get perspective on this project. And so it's not like we're, gathering public input just to put it on our shelf. We want it to be embraced by this project. And so if we were to do some additional public engagement, will TxDOT accept it?
Well, it's not will TxDOT accept it or not. TxDOT will definitely participate. If Harris County wants to do a public meeting, TxDOT will definitely on the 45 project will participate in it. Okay, but what I'm saying is, I just don't know how much resources. I mean, I'm not going to say bring my whole team over there to the entire meeting. I don't think any of us can afford to do that. We got 3 or 4 or 5 different agencies, like Harris County Flood Control is in it, Metro is in it, Harris County is in it, City of Houston in it, and TxDOT is in it. And every agency may want to go out there and do different public meetings for whatever the needs they need to do. We have to do it for NEPA. City of Houston Metro might wants to do it for whatever rail they want to propose on the I-45. TxDOT will definitely participate, and we'll have representatives, and we will help y'all whatever y'all need to do. But what I'm trying to say, the original language, the way it's written, actively engaged to participate in extensive public engagement process, including TxDOT, City of Houston, or other agency lead events and public outreach activities on I commit staff and resources to disseminate information or and the development on HIP. I mean, we'll send representative. You want us to give a presentation, we will do that. But I'm just trying to write it in a way that everybody can do their own public meeting. Not everybody have to do it all together every time, if you see what I'm saying.
So Eliza, if I could say what I think I heard you to say and kind of interpret what I think I'm hearing, I'm thinking you don't want this MOU to commit you to stretching your resources beyond your capabilities. And so if we were to look at the language, what we would see with the language here is if we were to what if we were to just take out as they deem necessary? Because I think what that does is it makes it kind of sound like you might not want to do a lot or something, but that's not what you mean. So I think what you're saying is that you all will continue to do what you've already done. So through all the City of Houston meetings that were sponsored or Harris County meetings that were sponsored, you all were there. And so start off by saying, you know, somebody was always there. So you're still going to do that.
Yes.
So I think if the way you actually have worded it, the only thing I would take out is as they deem necessary, because it sounds, you know, as if there's a little craftiness there. But if you just take out as they deem necessary and just say each party will actively engage the public with outreach activities and will collaborate and coordinate on public engagement efforts. To me, I think that's probably what we're trying to say.
Could I add that I think I understand that point about the NEPA required meetings that TxDOT is going to need to do. I think from the City of Houston standpoint, the community meetings of the last year have really yielded a lot of excellent input that we think, again, as the collaboration was thorough and TxDOT was there, and Eliza, you might have made every meeting. You know, your team was there, I think, throughout. It's not that we want to have meetings for the sake of having a meeting, but we're really looking for a dialogue and to generate content that is responded to by TxDOT, I think, in principle. You know, there are things, as you and Commissioner Ryan have been very articulate about, that you're not going to be able to do. So that's where it is a process where we are working together. So I think if I can maybe make another suggestion, I think there's two comments that are central to what the city has contributed, and when we get there, we'll cover it, but it really has to do with common goals and the community engagement piece. So I think if TxDOT needs to run certain meetings to fulfill a process, that would be one thing. But you know, we have a list of common goals and we want the public engagement to be robust, and we're happy to lead that. But as Commissioner Garcia was mentioning earlier, it really is a process that all parties have been a part of.
So, council member, what would you want to add something about the common goals into this sort of third bullet, or if we kind of do a little bit of what your statement was intimating in terms of your intent?
Well, I guess this is where it's tricky, right? Because we've all come up with our own edits on the same document. So we might have different language that we'd like to start with, and we are starting with TxDOT. So it might not, I might misspeak about wordsmithing it, but again, to the point I made earlier about wanting to be concise and tight on this document, those things that are talking about our common goals in community engagement, we like that kind of right up front and bold. And I think there are some things in the language that is still here as I can see it in tiny font on my screen. You know, the goal to increase the facility's capacity as the starting phrase seems misplaced to me, and I'd say the City of Houston. all agencies confirm common project goals to provide long-term capacity for all roadway users, including automobile, freight, and transit. Accommodate future travel demand, that is, and make travel safer for all road users, both on the highway and on connecting access roads. Improve the resiliency of the facility and create new opportunities for improved aesthetics, community enhancements, and quality of life, as outlined in the city's letter to Commissioner Court. That's sort of at the heart of the city's focus.
So that was city's language.
Yeah, you just got that up there.
Right. So I think to take these things all in sequence might be difficult, because if we're starting with one and editing from there, that might not be the most efficient way to do this. But I think if, again, to find like I'm saying, common goals, if we can also within the document find common language, settle on one version that's close, or get the one that seems to be closest to the center of our shared ideas.
Okay. All right. All right, so let's just talk about this first one, and I guess take a second to read over it. Councilmember Robinson verbalized it, but it's there for us to see at this point. And so, take a look and provide comment. Some of this, I mean, I know people may want to go away and think about, as opposed to just absolutely 100% confirm it right now, but I think, Eliza, you're kind of lead on TxDOT's perspective. Is there anything in this version that gives you anxiety?
Yes, a little bit. First of all, providing the long-term capacity for all roadway users. I think both short-term and long-terms are important, because we can't get to the long-term if we don't solve the issues that, but when they say long-term, is that 10 years, 20 years, or 5 years, or what is that number? Because right now we already have traffic congestion out there. We already have, as your point out, Chairman Lewis, that 45 is, you're concerned about the safety of that freeway, driving through that corridor. So I think both the short term, we have to solve the immediate problem, because it's already, the freeway is already functioning below its capacity, is over capacity as of today, right now. So we need to solve the short term as well as the long term problem on both. And the other thing, accommodate future multimodal travel demand. Vehicles is also important in there. I agree other modes are also important, but it seems like there's a lot more emphasis on multimodal, and I know that's what everybody's trying to get to at this point, but I think they're equally important. Multimodal is important, transit is important, vehicles is important, freight is important, evacuation is important, trying to get the goods to go from one place to other is important. I remember when interstate highway first started, and I-45 is an interstate highway, the whole purpose of building all these interstate highway is to get goods and services and people from California from the East Coast to the West Coast. That's how the origin of the interstate highway started. So I think some of that element is kind of diluted in this statement in there. I think they need to be added, plus, and kind of diluting the TxDOT goals and purpose to meet the transportation needs of the region, that also needs to be back in there. And some of the stuff, some of the items that's put on there, TxDOT may or may not be able to do, like you know, anything that's outside our right-of-way footprint. You know, we have a hard time justifying. We got rules and regulations for our funding. So we have to make sure that we're agreeing to things, we're considering things that I even think I can commit to. You know, I can legally spend $1 on, basically. So, I mean, I don't know how else to put it. I think it's a little bit more on trying to even everything out is needed in there.
Okay. All right, let me ask other comments from other committee members.
Thank you, Chairman. This
Yes.
is Larry Milliken, Councilman Lake City. And as being a born and raised Houstonian and have watched this city grow for the last 70 plus years, I am concerned about the language only because of the fact that over my time watching the city grow and the activities, not to take away from anything that Metro does, but to think that you're going to force the citizens of this region to do mass transportation by limiting the amount of vehicular lanes, I think is not a good route to take. Is that looking at the freeway congestion today and the capacity that it has, to think that you're going to provide something that may be, and I say may be underlined, well utilized by multimodal transportation in the future, I think is incorrect. Because today, like Eliza just said, is that it's congested now to the point that people traveling north from my area, they go around the city of Houston. They don't go through it. And to highlight another statement when we talk about evacuations is that when you look at the amount of people getting out of harm's way during a hurricane, and looking at the different routes that are available, you know, that's disturbing if you think that you're not going to improve the capacity in that evacuation system. But those are kind of my thoughts. I don't like the City of Houston's recommendations as well as I like the original draft. But thank you, sir.
All right, thank you. Others? Just Chairman Patman, I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna ask you to hold for just a second. Others on the line, on the call? I can't see. Okay, I'm gonna give a second for folks to unmute if anybody else has any comment they'd like to make right now. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2. Chairman Patman.
Okay. Well, no, I was just going to say to Councilmember Milliken, I agree with a lot of what you say. And just so you know, the MetroNext proposal that you all approved doesn't actually assume that a lot of additional people are going to get on transit. Although I think, well, no, let me say it that way, that additional percentage of the population is going to get on transit than takes it now. Because I think you raise a good point. The evidence is really unclear that if you build transit, they will come as an alternative to their cars. But what is clear is that a certain percentage of the population will take transit. And in order to keep up with regional growth and keep the capacity for that percentage, you had to expand transit. So we never, I think we've approached it in a lot of ways that you've talked about. And I agree with you that, well, I guess the idea of multimodal, the way I think of that, now that I have enough knowledge to be dangerous, having been Metro Chair a few years, is that is all modes. I mean, it's cars, it's HOV lanes, it's traditional high occupancy vehicles like either rail cars or bus rapid transit. It's bikes, it's everything. So if you're hung up on the word multimodal in there, which I can understand because it is one of those terms of art that people kind of use oftentimes to say we need more transit, but it really means everything. So that's just something to consider. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing that I think is going to happen here is once we move into this process, there are going to need to be a lot of studies done about, given the footprint of the project, how does it make sense to allocate that footprint? And I do think bus rapid transit will be a really important component to it. And I think it will easily justify, because based on riderships and projections now, that investment. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't also have one of the lanes at certain times of day as an HOV lane. And I know that's been a concern too, that we're reducing the HOV lanes for BRT. And I don't think that necessarily needs to happen. We just don't have the studies yet to determine how to allocate that space most effectively. So those are kind of a few rambling thoughts here. I like the city's language because I think it's crisper and clearer and tries to combine everything in the same bullet point. And to the extent Eliza has some things that need to be added, I think they should. From a linguistic standpoint, I like the city's language, but I don't personally think it locks us in to anything that you would be concerned about.
So I would say, and I'm going to ask you to kind of target this and looking at it, Eliza. It starts off with all roadway users. It says emphasizing multimodal travel, but then it goes to including automobile, freight, and transit. So I don't know, kind of, maybe let that, kind of, flip a minute and say, well, it kind of is there. Now, as Karin just says, there's, the knowledge that we have historically makes us dangerous. So now I'm going to come out with my dangerous quirks. Provide long-term capacity for all roadway users. We will never do that. I mean, no matter what we build this freeway to, just like when we did Katy, it's going to end up being congested, very likely. And so we're always going to be kind of behind the 8 ball in providing. So I like better addressing as opposed to providing, but addressing long-term capacity. You said you didn't like long-term, but I would even take out long-term and just maybe just addressing capacity for all roadway users.
I also liked Eliza's use of the word regional, even though, it's both, it's a local problem. And I think as Councilmember Milliken just said,
Right.
It's regional, and that might help broaden it.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know how strongly people feel about the word emphasizing. If we just include as opposed to emphasize, because I don't wonder if emphasize isn't one of the things that causes people pause, because it's sort of, I think it probably takes people to what does that actually mean? And it probably means something different to everyone who reads it.
The fact that it comes right before multimodal travel might look like it's tipping it toward, I don't know. I'm looking at Councilmember Milligan to see if I'm right about where he's coming from.
Yes, let me say is that I appreciate the comments. And I think that that's working through this activity. I do believe that the future of this region is in multimodal transportation. You know, I do believe that, but I don't think that you're going to change the nature of our constituents here in this region, just like we haven't changed them over the years. I think that Metro has done an outstanding job of getting capacity and ridership and transporting people. But at the same time, we have not met, um, you know, as Chairman Lewis said, is that we just haven't met the demand by any means. Is that in my lifetime, I've watched work centers change from downtown Houston to the Energy Corridor to Greens Point to Greenway Plaza. You know, we built all of those areas because we couldn't facilitate getting the workforce to downtown. Is that all of those places happened because it was easier to build those work centers than it is to keep people downtown and to get them to the work center. So that I believe that just as a whole, the city of Houston's language takes that and puts it into a different perspective, so that if a different person is reading this paragraph, it's that we're trying to emphasize and to go forward with multimodal travel for the future and not worry about today's activities. Is that while I think that we have to be very concerned about the future, I mean, everything that we work with today is that this region is going to go from 6 million to 10 million people. And to think that how long that freeway system has been there and how much longer is it going to be after this project is complete before we touch it again. And I'm very, very concerned about eliminating that increased capacity or the increase of transportation through this corridor. And that's, and so that while I think that the suggestions have been good and I agree with those suggestions, I would like to think that when we get through, it's not going to be just targeted and understood that it is for future transportation and towards multimodal, meaning everything, because today I think we have got a disaster on I-45 North.
Is your concern, council member, that we're not going to have enough lanes for cars? That's what I'm wondering.
Well, in one way is that I am no engineer. All right, my real estate is in background in retail sales. All right, but I am, like I said, a born and raised Houstonian, and I've been driving on these roads for years and years. I grew up in the town of Bel Air, and I happen to live in League City now. But I am very concerned when all of the discussion is about keeping the footprint the same and increasing the designated lanes for other activities other than automobiles, and thinking today that we're inadequate in the number of vehicles that's using the corridor today. And so,
well, yeah, let me
just say that is that when you're limiting the engineers and their ability to move all types of traffic, I'm concerned to where all of this whole region gets the use of this roadway and the facilities for the $7 billion project. Mm-hmm. This $7 billion project is one of the largest that we've undertaken. And I can tell you that I'm very concerned about listening just to the discussion and honing in on not increasing that capacity as much as I think that that's the real need and desire.
Okay, let me know when it's appropriate for me to speak again, Carol.
I'm through. You asked the question and I was just trying to explain.
No, I really appreciate it. I really appreciate it. Because I was just trying to understand. But I think what I hear is that we have a close to accord on the language. Because, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I may be misstating what you're conveying, Councilmember, but you do recognize we need, and I do too, multimodal, meaning different kinds of transportation to meet the needs. And so as long as we're not committing ourselves, like the whole thing's going to be turned into a transit corridor or something like that, everybody also agrees there has to be adequate capacity for vehicle traffic. I mean, that's just the reality of Texas. And so, but the problem with that is, as with the Katy Freeway, in order to do that, you have to build right now to alleviate congestion. What is it that the HGAC said? Chuck and Patrick, you may not be calling this to mind right away, but you'd have to have
a whole bunch of lanes.
Of additional lanes.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
so
more than
you
reasonable.
have to have, and you have buses on those corridors now. So if you have, and one thing we have done, by the way, in our concessions to this process as Metro is, the original idea was going to be to have 2 high occupancy vehicle lanes, which are considered transit lanes, by the way. And we operate those, except for the Katy Freeway, on either side of the median. And we've given up 2 of those and said, we'll just take 2 for now, or we'll accept a plan that has 2. So I think we're kind of on the same page. As chair of Metro, I would never say, as much as I'd love to see, well, I wouldn't love to see it because I want to be able to drive my car where I want to. But I would love to, you have to, in this region, you simply must have lanes for car traffic and for freight traffic. So I think we're on the same page. I really do.
So I think as a bottom line, we're all saying we need both. Let me just stop for just a second, Eliza. I think, was it Commissioner Beckendorf that wanted to say something?
Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead.
I interrupt. No, and I have to kind of agree with Mr. Milliken. I mean, I feel like if I went up to anybody and said, "Hey, would you like us to reduce traffic congestion, or should we strike this out?" I think I know what most everybody in this entire region, and we still have to think. While I agree, multimodal is the future, we still have to realize that there's a lot of people on the outskirts of our region that don't have access, or they would have to still drive into the metro area, which I've always said, hey, I'm ready for Metro to come out to Waller County. But so you have to look at everything, the lack of access, but also look at our region. We have a lot of traffic that comes through the city of Houston that they'll never use multimodal because we're right in the middle of the United States of America. That's why Waller County is growing so much. So I think we have to remember that it's our region, what traffic we have, and I think you have to include the traffic congestion, the crashes, and what we're looking at as a big picture.
Okay, thank you. Let me do this. I want to do a time check for us. It's 3:42, so that means we've got 17 minutes left, sort of. So if we can get to the point where we'll walk away and recraft this section today, then that will give us some great accomplishments, I think. And then we can take the rest of our time and kind of mesh what we've got from the submittals from both TxDOT and the city as something to send back out in preparation for our next meeting. But Commissioner Garcia, then Ms. Paul, and then I'll open for anybody else who wants to make a comment who hadn't had an opportunity to. Commissioner Garcia.
Thank you. I just want to add some perspective. And again, I was involved with this very similar project back when I was on city council. And the concept of multimodalism was evolving. It's developed much more, it's much more concrete than it's been in its past. And every day we're getting more evidence of the demand of it. But it's not just multimodalism that the community input is providing. It's also providing the fact that 45 from that segment of 610 to the Beltway is amongst the most dangerous in the region. And so the multimodalism is also a effort to make the roadways much safer. And so, and we've gotten away from the things that used to demand us to think of evacuations in a singular context. I mean, I think Mayor White and Judge Emmett, or rather Eccles, learned that when you say evacuate, people do all at once. And so we've evolved from those processes as well. But the other side of the equation is the same thing that has not, the community's position has not changed since my days on council. And that is that the widening in and of itself cannot be the singular approach. And so I'm glad that we're having this conversation, but I think that the language is moving us collectively in the right direction, that it's achieving a lot of different goals all at the same time. And it's quite frankly challenging us, and probably the single most challenging entity may be Metro in terms of encouraging more ridership, conveying more confidence in mass transit as a true alternative to single occupancy vehicles. And I think that's developing incredibly well in recent years. So I think we're moving in the right direction as a community. But the input that I have seen in the conversations that I've been involved in are indicating that that there's a new request from those that are making these areas their home, and that is that they want to have access to getting around town that isn't necessarily dependent on them owning a car.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Ms. Paul?
Yeah, I don't want to belabor it, but I just want to remind everybody, and also at the same time, that originally, when we start looking at the environmental process of the I-45 job, this was done as a collaboration, as a multimodal study. And the end result of the study was the creation of the red line, of Metro's red line, that was built over there at Fulton, on that area. And the next piece was for TxDOT to build the highway, the 45, which we are currently doing. So it does look at multimodal at the time, and it tries and address it. Granted, years has gone by and things has changed and all that. The way I look at the capacity on this 45 freeway is we need to build enough capacity for maybe vehicles currently in the short term, okay, for people, because like Mrs. Milligan say, Councilman say that people don't change their habit overnight. But we need the capacity, the room to be able to put what we want, what multimodal traffic we want to put in the future. Today, it could be vehicle. 10 years down the road, it could be bus, rapid transit, light rail, some vehicle, whatever that combination, Uber, Lyft, autonomous vehicle. So, but the issue is, if you don't build the capacity today at today's dollar, you're not even going to be able to implement whatever multimodal you want to put on the corridor. Okay, you're limiting yourself into what capability that you want to put on there. I mean, I tell everybody, if there's more people ride buses, you know, yeah, right, they deserve to have more lanes, you know, if less people is driving cars. So the mix of the use of the lane is going to change, but the capacity is needed. It's still needed to provide what we need, what we have to provide for the increase in population coming to the area. The increase in the traffic demand right now is already at or over capacity, definitely. So, I mean, if we don't build it, we're not going to be able to do and whatever the multimodal that you want to put in there either. That's really all I want to point out.
And Eliza, if I could just add this thought, if you're going to focus on the near term, then the pandemic has to be part of the equation. And a lot of companies are rethinking bringing their employees back to the core of the city. And work from home will be a standard model in the foreseeable future. And so then let's make sure that that's factored in as well.
Okay, so I think that we've heard a variety of thoughts. I think there's a way we can pull them together. I've heard some area, I think, of overlap, and we'll be looking for that in this particular section. But I think we have concurrence on, I'm going to say this, I think we have concurrence on. There is absolutely need for capacity for vehicles that may not be multi-occupancy. Capacity for multimodal travel. There's agreement on the table that we want our system to be built with the opportunity to increase the multimodal ridership over what we have today. We want that. We recognize that that's going to be necessary in order to accommodate the growth that we're going to have in the region, the 10 million people that we're expecting by 2040. Or whatever that number a year is, and that we're needing to do our best to take what we have today and make our best design option for that future. Now I'm going to throw out, we don't have a lot of time, but I'm going to throw out some personal thoughts and allow people in the next 5 minutes to you know, beat at me. And I'm going to go back on, these are sort of Carol quirks. One of the reasons that, again, we have this is that as we talk about building this facility, there's very high levels of concern about the communities who live there. So in this first paragraph narrative, we've got community enhancements. I actually would want to change the wording to respecting community character, because I don't know what community enhancements mean. But I think that what we want to do is to make sure that the character, the culture, the long time residents, you know, the nature of their neighborhoods, I think we want to make sure that this facility respects that. And so that's kind of what I would think of in terms of wording that. And then my last little kind of quirk is, I love the term quality of life. I have no idea what it means. And as a planner, I've used it myself for 20 years, but I actually would prefer not to use it because I don't know what it means. I don't know how we measure it. I don't know how we know when we get there. It probably means something different to, you know, everybody sitting around the table. So I would not include quality of life, and I would want to change how we phrase community enhancements. So in the 3 to 4 minutes we have before we adjourn, right, you all can let me know what you think about that.
Well, since it came from the city, I will mention that I don't take it personally. I was the vice chair for our quality of life committee. And while we had a definition, you know, when I taught at Texas Tech, we always thought of that as a broad and inclusive term, because of course you can say with a qualifier in front of quality, it can be a good or a bad quality of life, right? So enhancements mean good. I think your points, Dr. Lewis, about engaging the community, respecting their health and sense of interest in the overall project is why the community engagement needs to be as robust as we can make it. And I know the city and the mayor, generally speaking, we all agree there is a very strong commitment to that ongoing process, which is where I think, again, to the point about the meetings that might satisfy TxDOT's need for the NEPA process, we feel strong about our ability to continue with the community engagement meetings, and that really ensures a way for the community to understand our commitment in an iterative process. So I'm not wed to quality of life being there. I understand your point. I think it's a good one, but I think the more important points you made about the local community is what I will hold on to that.
Okay. So in other words, you like the phrase community enhancements?
Yeah, I do. I think that can also mean a lot of things, but
that's what I was going to ask you what it means.
Well,
because to me it means that you're going to go in and put in a statue, or I mean, or paint something. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. Yep. Well, again, I'm open to suggestions.
So other thoughts?
We should be open to suggestions.
All right. Chairman Patman.
One example that I think of when I think of community enhancements is the fact that the bus rapid transit is going to be designed to give more access to people in the communities affected by the roadway. So I don't know what was meant by community enhancements, but it's an example of something, and that in connection with building those stops and all that kind of thing, that we do some things that, as we do now, to hopefully enhance the communities.
Now, I would consider that a community enhancement. The thing I would ask is, do we have the concept in there about really respecting what the community was saying about their neighborhood and their neighborhood character? And if everyone feels like we're good with community enhancements and that embraces it, then I'll be good with it too.
Can you say what you just said one more time, Dr. Lewis?
Ooh, I want to say which time.
The community character.
The one about neighborhood.
I started off saying, I said respecting community character. That's what I had worded. Respecting community character.
I don't know what that is, honestly.
You don't know what that means? So that means that if I've been in a neighborhood, if I have to explain it, then it shouldn't be in the wording here, right? But if I've been in a neighborhood my entire life and it has a feel, like if I go to Alameda Road on Houston, right, then I know that Alameda is an area that's had Black businesses forever. There are Black businesses there now. It's where I would go if I wanted to have sort of a Black experience, right, in my neighborhood. So that's what I mean by neighborhood character. In those neighborhoods, there's certain places where people go to hang out. It's the character of the neighborhood. And so, as you're building and I'll tell you, my example of this was sort of 288, which, when 288 was built, it sort of separated Third Ward. I don't think we've got that situation now because we're more on the periphery, but I think there are some decisions that as we go forward, when people look at the neighborhood and think about the neighborhood character, it could change how some of the alternatives are looked at. So that's what it means.
Dr. Lewis, if I could add to your thoughts, precisely, again, going back to my time on council, the point that the community had made back then was that there was a lack of respect for the community because back then it was proposed to take or to cut into Hollywood Cemetery as an example and cut into the areas of the historic heights. Obviously, those are negative impacts to those neighborhoods. Those are examples of maybe not respecting communities and doing things to preserve and to protect and to maintain are examples of respect. So I would think respecting communities or community characters is can be understood even from someone who may be removed from this process. And the quality of life, I think all of us in this room kind of understand what those things mean, but if we need to define it, I'd be happy to. And I think it means we can measure, walkability. We can measure reduction in pedestrian and bicycle fatalities. We can measure reduction in car crashes. We can measure the impact of less emissions being released. So I think that we can create some language to measure quality of life, and I think that's I would just defer to the city of Houston to see if that's in line with their thinking.
I actually like what you said about defining quality of life. So now we have the understanding of what we actually mean by it here. So that helps me. Commissioner Beckendorf, did you have a comment?
I think I so support, having that sense of community. In a way, I would describe it as going to your local business and the teller, the greeter asks how your parents are because they know your parents because they did business there. It's that old community feel. And we have to preserve that as much as we can because that's what makes that community special. I think giving those communities opportunities because everybody's quality of life is different. So give them the opportunity to go make their quality of life what they want it to be. It's not our job to, as a panel that deals with, traffic and infrastructure, to define what quality of life is. We have a pretty black and white job here, but it's very hard to define quality of life because what my expectations or what makes me happy may be the opposite of somebody else's. We need to stick to our original purpose. Again, not repeat ourselves, but our job is not to define what the quality of life is or what an opportunity is or anything like that. Let's keep it.
I like that point. We could add something that says, and quality of life as defined by the local community and as outlined in the city's letter and Commissioner Court's resolution.
Okay. All right.
Chairman Lewis, I
Yes.
was just going to add that, I think the community character is definitely important, all the community have their own distinct, high independence, high, they are fifth ward, they are different. And I think you all will see, and that's one reason why we're thinking the MOU may be a little bit mature and all that. A lot of the commitments that we have done, it's going to be in the FEIS. You will see some of these commitments on the neighborhood and all that in the FEIS that we have actually committed to in there. So I just want to point that out.
Perfect. Okay. All right. So any other comments for the good of the order? It is 4:02. All right. So going forward, I think we're going to go through we're going to confirm that our background, we're going to call that completed. And we're not going to go back and revise that anymore. I don't think. And then we're going to go. I don't know if y'all heard me say I don't think, but it was low. But
I thought we were going to add more language in for the capacity that we discussed.
Okay, not in the background section though.
No. In this scope of work, this paragraph right here.
I was going through our entire 2 hours. So
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
No,
the background
I don't want to go
section.
back to background. No.
Right, exactly. We don't want to go back to background. All right, but in our purpose, we're going to go through and do some revisions there and send those out to folks. Maybe, I think, Patrick, independently, we won't wait for everything, but as soon as that section is finished, go ahead and pulse it out so we can start getting feedback. Then into the scope of work, we're on to our first bullet. We've had lots of communication about it, lots of discussion. We'll do some synthesis of all that we've heard, which is a lot, and then get that out to everyone. And so that will be what we've accomplished for today. What we want to do, I think, too, before we kind of all click off, is sort of agree that we'll have maybe 2 more meetings after this, hopefully. Maybe 1 if we're very accomplished in our next meeting, to get through the rest of the section in the scope of work. And so potentially think about 2 more meetings, but maybe just 1 to try to get all the way through the document. And Chuck, Patrick, closing thoughts, comments?
I think really good conversation today. Patrick, if you could look into an option that might allow us to share a document that various folks could comment on, so we have one document with track changes in it as opposed to multiple versions from everybody as they come along, that might make things easier in the future to move things along.
Very
Now
well.
that I have everyone's comments, I'll be able to combine all this into one. I've been receiving comments almost until the last minute, so now I have everyone, so I can combine these into one document. And also we have sent some additional dates for the upcoming meetings. The email should have gone from Lucinda Martinez. So if you can agree to some of those dates, we'll be able to schedule some meetings after TPC in September.
Okay. All right, anything else? Let me thank you all immensely. I think this has been awesome. And I really appreciate everybody's time, everybody's comments, everybody's thoughtfulness. I think it's just great. So look forward to everyone's continuing to kind of think through some of this. Shoot in your comments to Patrick when you get those first drafts, second drafts, whatever that next versions. And we'll look forward to getting online with everyone at the next meeting. So thanks, and motion to adjourn.
Thank you all. So move.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you,
Thank
Dr.
you,
Lewis.
everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. All right.